Hello again, and welcome to another segment of This Week with Mitch Grosky. Today, we're going to be talking about something a little bit different. We're going to be talking about a game called Angry Birds, because it seems to me that this year, the Republicans are acting out the game of Angry Birds, although they're doing it with a twist. So let me tell you what I'm talking about. In the game, you have these pigs that have stolen the eggs from these angry birds, and these angry birds launch themselves on this, I know it sounds ridiculous, but on this giant slingshot. They launch themselves at these pigs, presumably to destroy the pigs and get their eggs back. So it seems to me that the Republicans certainly think that President Obama, has stolen something from them. If not their eggs, it's their presidency. They had the presidency when President Bush was in office, and Obama, the Democrat, took that away from them. So you would understand that these angry Republicans are all going after President Obama. And in fact, to a certain extent, they are. But what I wanted to report on is that the Republicans are different kinds of angry birds, because rather than going against the Democrat, President Obama, they're really turning against each other. The Republicans have said some pretty terrible things about one another, and it's going to be very difficult for them to disown all those really terrible things they've said when it comes time for the general election. Let me give you some examples, and I want to point out that if you want the full report, you can go to my blog, This Week with Mitch Grosky, and that's at www.thisweekwithmitchgrosky.wordpress.com. There you'll get the full report, but here I'm just giving you some examples. First of all, attacking Governor Santorum. Michelle Bachmann said, and these are all quotations, "If you look at the spending issue, Senator Santorum voted for the bridge to nowhere. Santorum has stood for earmarks, has stood for spending." Governor Perry also attacked Governor Santorum, saying, alluding to his earmarks, "Why was it important to vote for a Montana Sheep Institute?" Congressman Paul has also attacked Santorum. Congressman Paul, in an ad, called former Governor Santorum a corrupt corporate lobbyist, a Washington insider with a record of betrayal. Then, when questioned by George Stephanopoulos, Congressman Paul said about Santorum, "What really counts is his record. I mean, he's a big government, big spending individual, because, he preached to the fact that he wanted a balanced budget amendment, but voted to raise the debt 5 times. So he's a big government person." Again, this is Ron Paul talking about Santorum. And he goes on to say directly to Santorum, "So you're a big spender. That's all there is to it. You're a big government conservative. And you didn't vote for, right to work and those very important things. And that's what weakens this economy. So to say you're conservative, I think, is a stretch. But you've convinced a lot of people, so somebody has to point out your record." And finally, Congressman Paul, again blasting former Governor Santorum, says, back to Senator Santorum, "He ducks behind this. He's for the balanced budget amendment, but he voted 5 times to increase the national debt by trillions of dollars." This is what the whole Tea Party movement's about. Government's practically stopped over increasing the national debt. You did it 5 times, so what's your excuse for that? That's trillions of dollars. You kept this thing going. So you can see that the Republicans have really been attacking former Governor Santorum. Now, what about Ron Perry? Has he gotten off? Not exactly. Governor Romney has been attacking Perry. He says, and the reason we're so animated about stopping illegal immigration is that there are 4.5 million people who want to come here who are in line legally. We want that to happen in an orderly and legal process. And Governor Perry, you say you've got the experience. Well, that's a bit like saying, you know, the college coach that lost 40 games in a row has the experience to go to the NFL. John Huntsman has also attacked Governor Perry. He said, when he was talking about Perry's comments on evolution and global warming, he said about Perry, the minute the Republican Party becomes the anti-science party, then we've got a huge problem. And then Romney, in another instance, attacked Perry, saying, over the last decade, the number of illegal immigrants in Texas is estimated to have grown by 60%. Governor Perry should explain to the people of New Hampshire why he thinks their opposition to his liberal immigration policies means that they don't have a heart. Now, former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich has been attacked repeatedly, particularly by Ron Paul. And here are some of the things that have been said about Newt Gingrich. Again, this is by other Republicans, not by Democrats. This is by other Republicans. Ron Paul said, when Newt Gingrich was called to service in the 1960s during the Vietnam era, guess what he thought about danger? He chickened out on that. He got deferments and didn't even go. So, Newt Gingrich has no business talking about danger because he's putting other people in danger. Some people call that kind of program a chicken hawk. And I think he falls into that category. Again, those were Ron Paul's comments about Newt Gingrich, a fellow Republican. And Ron Paul also had a hard-hitting TV ad that accused Newt Gingrich of serial hypocrisy. In the ad, it shows Newt as a Washington insider who supported conservative principles as House Speaker, but then profited from special interests when he became a high-dollar consultant. Romney went on to say about Gingrich, America needs a leader, not someone who's an insider. And finally, Ron Paul, again attacking Romney and Gingrich, said, politicians who supported bailouts and mandates, and he... Then Rick Perry attacked both Gingrich and Paul. He accused Newt Gingrich of being the granddaddy of earmarks, while Newt Gingrich was House Speaker, the granddaddy of earmarks. And in talking about both Gingrich and Paul, he said, for some people, earmarks have become an art form. Held up there a picture of Gingrich and Romney. Serial hypocrites and flip-floppers can't clean up the mess. So again, that's what the Republicans have been saying about Newt Gingrich. Okay, so what about Ron Paul? He was doing a lot of attacking of other Republican candidates. All these Republican candidates disregarding Ronald Reagan's advice to never speak ill of a fellow Republican, what he called the 11th commandment. But nevertheless, Ron Paul was attacking all these other Republicans. Did anybody attack Ron Paul? Well, yes, they did. They attacked Ron Paul quite a bit. And once again, I've got 3 pages here. You can see some of it highlighted in yellow, and I've just given you a few samples of what some of his fellow Republicans have said about Ron Paul. So what about these attacks against Paul? Well, first of all, Rick Perry said you don't have to vote for a candidate who will allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon to wipe Israel off the face of the earth, because America will be next. I'm here to say you have a choice. Gingrich, speaking about Paul, said that Paul was totally outside the mainstream of every decent American. Again, this is Gingrich talking about Ron Paul. Michelle Bachmann, who's now out of the race, but again, as a fellow Republican who was in the race, she said Paul would be dangerous as president, because of his hands-off views on national security. In referring to some robocalls that were made, saying that Santorum was pro-abortion and against the Second Amendment, which got Santorum pretty upset that these calls were saying that. Santorum said that Ron Paul is disgusting for being behind the calls. Michelle Bachmann said that Ron Paul doesn't believe the government should protect the institution of marriage. Rick Perry said about Paul that Paul was a hypocrite for condemning political gamemanship while seeking federal funds for pet projects such as bike racks and decorative street lamps in his district. Rick Santorum, in the January 8th debate, said that the serious issue with Congressman Paul here is he's never really passed anything of any import. He has no track record of being able to work together. He's been out there on the margins and has really been unsuccessful in working with anybody to do anything. So again, these are really some hard-hitting attacks on Ron Paul from his own colleagues in the Republican Party. And finally, Rick Perry said, I mean, what frustrates me is that you, Ron Paul, go get the earmarks and then you vote against the bill. Now, I don't know what they call that in other places, but Congressman Paul in Texas, we call that hypocrisy. And then finally, Gingrich summed it up by saying, well, Dr. Paul has a long history of saying things that are inaccurate and false.